Another week of off-site education. We're going to do the best we can. This is going to be, like it said in the assignment where you found this is going to be the first of a series. We are going to go through these notes, usually about 4 or 5 slides at a time. And while I still expect you guys to take notes rather than check your notes every week, which seems excessive, I'll give you a quiz, usually somewhere between 3 and 5 questions, just to make sure you're pulling the important stuff out of this. And as always, if you have questions, you can either leave them in the comment or hang on to them until we do office hours on Thursdays, and we can chat about it then. Before we get going, I would like you to just take a sec to bask in the visual glory of this first slide. Get it? Because it's the legislature and there's branches coming out of the Capitol. Yeah, you missed this. I know you do. Let's get rolling. All right. So first of all, this week we're going to be dealing with some basic terminology stuff, and then we are going to go over the House of Representatives. We will save the Senate and committees for next week, something to look forward to. All right, terminology. Yeah, there's a lot of that in this one. Okay, so let's get going. The term is the length of time that a person is going to serve in office. So as we've established throughout the year, the term for a representative is going to be 2 years, and then everybody's up for re-election, whereas the term for a senator is going to be 6 years, with 1/3 of the Senate going up for election every 2 years in a rotating fashion. So, pretty simple. Most of this stuff is. Constituents. Constituents is a term we have used throughout the year, and I'm pretty sure I've defined in all of your classes at this point, but just to go over it again. A constituent or constituents are the people represented. So a representative's constituents are the people in their House district, whereas the constituents for a senator are the people in the entire state. Now, granted, in our case here in Montana, these overlap. Greg Gianforte's constituents are the same as Danes and Testers, but in other states, you will have a representative who maybe represents San Jose, California, whereas the senators from California's constituents would be the citizens of the entire state. Now, next up, bicameral. You hopefully remember this because I believe it was a question on your final, and also we talked about it multiple times and it's been on quizzes. Bicameral just means we have a 2-house legislature. We have an upper house and a lower house. The upper house is the Senate. The lower house is the House of Representatives. That is based largely on seniority. Remember, you need to be 30 to be in the Senate, but you only need to be 25 to be in the House. So, session is up next. And this is the time in which Congress is convened, so are brought together and are actively working on stuff. So if you look at the calendar on the right, the days in yellow are days that both chambers are in session. That means everybody is theoretically there working. Days in green, so January, and that 1 week in July, only the House is going to be there. The Senate's going to be gone. They will usually be back campaigning. Whereas the blue dates, as you can see, there's a couple weeks in there, but there's a lot of Fridays and Mondays as well, are days that only the Senate's in session. This will be more clear kind of as we go over stuff, but it stands to reason is the House needs to sort of get their ducks in a row because there's a lot of them, which is why they're the only ones that are going to work in January. So they need to lay out their game plan to get bills ready to send to the Senate throughout the year. So they're going to take that time in January to plan. Whereas the Senate is going to stick around Washington longer because remember, they're only up for election every 6 years, so they don't have to go home as much. Whereas representatives are going to go home on all of these Fridays that we see here because they need to be back for long weekends. It's the same reason that they're gone on Mondays a lot, is so they can be back campaigning and meeting with their constituents. Now, normally sessions are regularly scheduled, but you can have special sessions. Special sessions, as we talked about last chapter in the executive branch, or 2 chapters ago, whenever that was, are going to be called by the president if something specific happens. So we talked about during the Obama administration, he called special session of Congress to ensure the piece of legislation got passed. Or we talked about when Franklin Roosevelt called a special session of Congress December 8th, 1941, immediately after Pearl Harbor had been attacked, so Congress could immediately declare war on the Empire of Japan. It can go both ways. It is a special session. It's kind of a rarity, but Congress can be called into them and they are obligated to show up. And then lastly is adjournment. And this is when a session closes. Both houses need to agree to this so you don't run into kind of like what's happening in Oregon right now, which is large parts of the legislature just bailing and not showing up to stop laws from being passed. Adjournment is basically to ensure that one house, say the House of Representatives, doesn't want to pass a bill that would be approved by the president. And so somebody just says, all right, hey, we're all going to pack up and leave early and leave the Senate in the lurch, or vice versa. So the idea of adjournment is officially closing a session for the year. Both houses need to agree to it, and rarely is there an issue with that. As nasty as the legislative branch has gotten over the last, 16 years, it's still relatively civil, and we don't really have many issues over adjournment. Let's go to the House of Representatives. So, House of Representatives is referred to as the lower house. It is, as you can see with Lucy and Linus up there on the top right, the little brother house. They're serving shorter terms, and their job is far less secure than that of their fellows in the Capitol building, the senators. So they're considered the lower house, but, and this is their big superpower as we've talked about before this year, it is the only place from which revenue bills can originate. You can only start taxes in the House. And this is the big thing they have going for them, because if anybody else wants to do anything, you got to pay for it, and you're going to pay for it with taxes. Our representative is on screen right here. That's Greg Gianforte. We'll see if he's wins the governorship this November, who takes over. He would get to appoint somebody unless there was a special election. But there is our single representative. That map on the bottom right, we will deal with apportionment in a second, but that's what you were looking at there. 435 members of the House of Representatives. That is set by Congress, not listed in the Constitution. It's not like back in 1789, James Madison was like, yep, 435 sounds like a bomb number of people to put in for 13 states. Let's do that. No, it's expanded as the country has expanded, and we're pretty much locked in at 435 unless we were to add another state, at which point Congress would probably vote to increase the number of representatives in the House of Representatives. As we've said, every 2 years, every single member is up for re-election, which is why we make them the ones responsible for tax bills, because they're immediately answerable to their constituents. If they pass a tax bill that is unpopular, they're going to get booted out, or vice versa. If they vote against a tax bill that is popular, they will get booted out, and vice versa. If they do something that's popular, hooray, I'm going to take ownership of that. Your taxes are lower thanks to me in the House. Vote for me again. Every state is guaranteed at least one representative. That's where we're at right now. Current estimates, assuming that everybody in the state accurately fills out their census, have Montana is one of, I think, the top 3 states likely to gain a seat in the House of Representatives after reapportionment after this year's census. So that would be cool. As we saw when we were looking at state districts a while ago, the zigzag line for us would probably look something like this. It would be like Helen and Missoula kind of going down would have one district, and everything east of us would be another district. But the state, our board, our nonpartisan board, could redraw that border however they want it. But every state guaranteed at least one representative, and there are additional numbers based on the size of the population and the portion of the population in each state. And, we went over all that with the good census stuff. There's no cap on the maximum number of representatives outside of the fact that we are only allowed 435 and every state has to have one. So, you do the math there, but that's basically, the same. District reapportionment follows the census every 10 years. And then you redraw it. So as you can see, the states in blue there the states in blue there gained seats. The states in gray, like us, remained pat at the number of representatives we had, and the orange states lost votes. That would be because some states have gained in population and some states have lost in population commensurately. So there you go. Florida and Texas, always growing. East Coast is emptying out a little bit just because it's kind of full and there's nowhere else to go. All right, continuing to roll here. I thought this was interesting. This is worthwhile. This is off Politico, which is a worthwhile political site for data. Their articles are politically skewed to the left, but you can't really argue with numbers here. This is your wealth of members in the House and the Senate. So the House is the one up on the top. That's why there's more of them, whereas the Senate's on the bottom. So dark green there is the top 1% of all earners. There are 183 congressmen that fall within there. Then light green and dark green are the top 10% of all earners. So you're looking at another 174 congressmen there. And then tan is adding in another 10%. So we are looking at all but 30 Congress members are in the top 20% earners in the United States. And granted, we'll talk about what they make in a little bit, but that also factors in, family wealth, companies that their spouses own, all that stuff. And then the bottom 80%, again, only 30 people there. So the House, and as you can see with the Senate as well, largely wealthy folks because it's expensive to run for office. And so representation only goes so far, if you will. The poor are not literally bits and pieces, but it is important to go over exactly what is a member of the House of Representatives and how do you get to be one. So, facts on our left side. We'll start off here. You've got to be at least 25 years old to be a member of the House of Representatives by the time you are sworn in. So that is January following the November election. So you can be 24 while you're running, but you have to be 25 by the time you are signed in. There have been a couple exceptions to this way back when, but we're not going to go into it. You need to have been a U.S. citizen for at least 7 years. That can be natural born or naturalized. It does not matter. Remember, only a president needs to be born within the country. Anyone else can just become a citizen. Sorry about that. They need to be a resident of the state they will represent. They do not need to be a resident of the district they will represent, which causes some issues. There are people for both parties who are just sort of like floater candidates, and they just kind of go from state to state where the party needs them. So the RNC might say, hey, there's a contestable seat in, eastern Iowa. Larry, we know you normally live in Tennessee, but move to Iowa, establish residency there so you can run and maybe win that seat. You also don't have to live within the exact district, again, because district lines change. So, for example, if you lived on the border of District 1 and District 2, and your state got reapportioned more seats and chose to redraw the border through your neighborhood, you could still represent District 1 even if your house now appeared in District 2. So one of them is the sort of calculating political reason of hey, we just need to drop somebody into a state to run. The other one is the kind of the real life version, which is district lines change and you want to make sure that someone can still vote for the same person even if that person has been moved or districted out. So this cuts down on shenanigans of one party trying to cheat the other party by moving their representative to a different district. The House is very rules and procedure based. We'll go over more of this later, and hopefully if we get to do mock Congress, we're going to kind of lean more on this one. But because there are 435 members of the House of Representatives, it can get very, very tricky if rules are not followed. So there's a whole lot of the chair recognizes this person, the speaker says this, we need to have this, we need to have that, and going by all of Robert's Rules of Order. That is just to make sure that absolute chaos does not erupt among the 435 people that are there. Also, because of those 435 people, debates are pretty short in the House of Representatives. In the Senate, as we'll see, you have unlimited time for debate. The House is usually going to set standards that say, okay, you have 5 minutes to make your case. When the buzzer goes, you have to be quiet. And that is to speed stuff along. So the House is much more regimented, much more bang, 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 as opposed to the Senate, which is going to be much more kind of languorous and just, hey, let's have a conversation, man. Talk about whatever you want. Now, on the other side of this page, we've got roles. Your normal representative is going to make $174,000 a year. Flat salary. You don't get bonuses or anything like that. The U.S. taxpayer is giving you $174,000 a year to be a representative. You take that money, you smile, and you go ahead. The House of Representatives is run by the Speaker of the House currently. I'll wait. That is correct, everybody. Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi, as the Speaker of the House, is going to make $223,500 a year. Then, this is much less of a big deal in the House than it will be in the Senate, are the majority and minority leaders. Those are the heads of each party in the House, so it is their job to manage the Democrats or manage the Republicans in the House of Representatives, make sure they're all on the same page, negotiate so they're sure that they can get the right number of votes, all that stuff. They're going to make $193,400 a year. There really is no other payment than that. Those are your three standards. You have your regular representative, the one Speaker of the House, and the two leaders, one minority, one majority. The Speaker of the House is elected by simple majority. The majority and minority leaders are chosen by their party. So it's not like you're appointed to be a majority or a minority leader. Then you have the person called the whip. There are whips for both parties, and sometimes there are even assistant whips. And the whip's job is to keep track of where the votes are going and also to keep people in line, basically. So they're the ones that are going to say, all right, we currently have 3 more votes that we need to get this bill passed. We need to go around and wrangle up 3 more votes. So they're the ones that might say, hey, it could be harmful for you to vote out of, let's say, I don't know, Kansas. It would be bad for our Kansas representative here to vote for this bill. So you, Kansas representative, don't have to vote for this, but you, guy who lives in a safe district in Massachusetts, are going to vote for it. So they're the ones that do all of the sort of the calculus that it takes to elect the right person for voting for an unpopular bill. Elect is probably the wrong word. Single out is probably the best one. So it's the whip's job to basically make sure that everything gets done and gets done well. And it will be the speaker or the majority and minority leaders that will kind of go to the whips and make sure that business is continuing apace. So the whip has a very thankless but very important job. As for salaries, these go up and down. Remember, the 27th Amendment allows Congress to give itself a pay raise. So the salaries automatically go up now. That's just how Congress has voted on it, unless they vote against it. So they basically have to say, no, we don't deserve a pay raise, and then the pay raise won't go into effect. Otherwise, it does. But yeah, that's it for that one. So we're going to take a look at one more slide, and we're going to call represented in Congress just because it's hard for poor folks to justify the time and expense to run for office. All right, so how do elections for the House of Representatives work? Based off the Reapportionment Act of 1929, that created automatic reapportionment, which said, A, your house is locked. We reset every 10 years. So that just laid out what most states had already been doing with the census. And really, since we haven't added a new state since 1958, that has been best practice since then. On the right there is just a little more in-depth of that map we saw earlier. Texas gained more than 4 seats, where you can see that Ohio and New York were the big losers. Florida gained 2 or 3 seats. So that is just to kind of go more in-depth. One House seat is roughly 650,000 people as of 2010. As the U.S. population continues to grow, which it does, that number will change with the 2020 census, and they will figure out what the new number of people required is, and then they will reapportion based on that. As for actual election stuff, the majority party that won during the presidential election is very likely to lose seats at the midterm election. It's very, very rare outside of like extraordinary events happening. We're talking like World War II here, that the majority party is going to hold on to the majority in the House of Representatives. That's usually going to flip every 2 years, sometimes every 4 years. But long story short, you have a tight leash on your representative, and people are pretty likely to tug that if everything does not go perfectly. And there are going to be some states where somebody's going to get mad about something a representative did, and that can cause a landslide in the other direction. So House is way more malleable. Once you are locked into the Senate, you are pretty locked into the Senate, whereas the House, obviously with those shorter term limits, you are more likely to get booted or come back in. Like we talked about when we were doing districts, the county I used to work in Illinois kept flipping back and forth basically between a Republican and a Democrat, same two guys for like the previous like 6 or 8 election cycles. It was just Republican Tim, Democrat Dave, and they just went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And as soon as one lost a seat, they would start running for re-election right away again. Like both their offices were just permanent fixtures downtown. So that can happen with the House. And that's where we're going to leave it for this week. We will pick up with the Senate next time. So we have gone over the little brother of the representative branch, and next week we will do the Senate. So make sure you are all good on notes here, and you'll have somewhere between 3 and 5 questions to answer based on these couple slides we've gone over, and those will be due on Sunday. All right, enjoy your week. Enjoy the snow, I guess. All right, see you folks. Bye.